Thank you for listening to, I almost said ruin my childhood. Thank you for listening to Remake Rewind, the podcast where we decide if remakes or reboots should have happened.
Off to a
I'm
good
Mike,
start.
as always. God, just fucking killing the game,
Let's start.
bro.
Let's start again. Start again.
No, we're gonna keep rolling.
No, I mean keep that part in, but just start again.
Thank you for listening. No, hey, I'm Mike, as always. With me, I've got my co-host Alex. How you doing, bud?
I'm fine. Give me the death stare. Oh man, we're not even drinking in this episode.
No, what are we talking about today? But that was a weird episode, by the way. It was fun.
Yeah, I had a good time. I really enjoyed that one. I've actually I've been on the wagon for the last week. Well, with the exception of last night. So I guess I had to come down.
So you were on the wagon for 6 days?
Well, I'm dry. I wouldn't say I'm sobering up or anything, but
nice.
I took a little break, and yesterday was my cheat day. Nice. Hey man, I'm good. We are talking about COVID the movie and the sequel, COVID the movie 2020.
So we're actually covering The Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend.
The Last Man on
Vincent
Earth.
Price classic. Just be Earth. Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price from 1964 and the 2007 Will Smith vehicle I Am Legend. And the main reason we picked this was last episode we were kind of drinking and Will Smith's been in the news. We're like, oh, what can we do with Will Smith? And we're like, oh, I Am Legend. Not even thinking about that as a pandemic movie. And I was watching... I got like 20 minutes into I almost said I Am Legend, Last Man on Earth, and I was like, oh shit, this is a pandemic movie. Why are we watching this?
Yeah. Yeah, it was...
But I was also like, I already watched it, and I texted you about it when I was in the middle of watching I Am Legend, and I'm like, I've already watched one movie. I'm not starting this podcast over with 2 new movies. We're just going to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, it was weird. Hit a little close to home. It was a weird pairing to watch this late into quarantine. I feel like it would have made sense in the first month, but at this point,
right?
Especially because like I Am Legend is so focused on the government failing at every level, and that feels a little bit too real. They're just missing the secret police.
Yeah. Oh, don't even get me started.
Which we're not going to talk about. Yeah,
I've been arguing with people. I almost said all week. It's only been like 3 days, but for like 3 days, I've been arguing with people like how this is a dangerous precedent, and people don't fucking get it. And I can't. This is our safe space. We're talking about movies.
I'm biting my tongue.
Yeah,
movies, escapism, sort of.
Escapism. Normally escapism. This time, not as much.
Yeah, but as escapey as we can make it.
Have you seen these movies before
yeah,
this weekend?
I've seen I Am Legend a handful of times. I've never seen Last Man on Earth, nor have I seen
Omega Man. That one either. I did see Omega Man. I kind of wanted to do Omega Man, but I left it up to you, and you went with Vincent Price.
I've seen more Charlton Heston movies than I've seen Vincent Price, and I like Vincent Price a lot more than Charlton Heston. So
me too.
I'll jump at the opportunity to watch Price instead of Hest.
I am less likely to make fun of Vincent Price as I am Charlton Heston.
Yeah, there's nothing to make fun of with Vincent Price. I mean, like,
yeah, he has a very has his method and he sticks with it.
Yeah, like
not that he's consistently good.
I was gonna say like not even that he's fantastic or anything. He just like is a weirdo and likes to do his fucking weird movies and stuff.
Weird 50s, 60s horror films.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm not gonna shit on somebody for being weird and maybe not being the best actor in the world, but like he's unique.
He made a living.
Yeah, well, he's unique, and as far as I know, didn't hurt anybody. Charlton Heston.
As far as I know,
Charlton Heston seems like a crotchety old bitch. So
he seems like he's punched somebody in the face before
that didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
Like maybe
that caveat, that asterisk.
Yeah, I think maybe Hest deserves to be punched in the face once or twice.
I mean, he's dead, so maybe let's not punch him.
Now we can go get his gun. That's a dumb joke. Cut that out.
Yeah, I don't know what you're going for with that, but yeah,
Cold Dead Hands.
Okay,
Got
it.
People in the audience got it.
Got it.
Yeah,
got it. I'll add some.
Tweet me if you understood that.
You want to give me the elevator pitch for this one or the second one?
I'll do this one.
Cool, do it, bud.
Last Man on Earth. Vincent Price wanders around for 15 minutes and doesn't say anything. And then he runs into a lady, and it turns out he's a dick, and the world ends.
Yeah,
the end.
Very, very simplistic. God, this movie, I didn't dislike it, but I don't want to say I really enjoyed this film. But it's short. Like, it's not a long movie. It's an easy watch.
Yeah, it was interesting.
There were a lot of things I didn't understand, and there were a lot of things from a set design aspect. I was just like, it was a little too minimal for me to believe.
Well, let's back up
for lived this long.
Let's back up for a second. I'll give you a real breakdown of the movie. I was trying to be silly, and I'm not sure how successful I was.
I thought you were pretty silly.
Thank you. It was silly, but maybe people in the audience don't know what this movie's about. So Vincent Price is all alone in a post-apocalyptic, what is it, England? Somewhere in the UK?
No, he's supposed to be, I think he's supposed to be in the US, even though they filmed this in Europe.
Oh, okay. No, I think it says Europe somewhere in the movie.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, he's alone wherever he is, and except for all these vampiric zombie creatures that only come out at night. So he spends his days going across the city. He's marking off all these things on the map, right? What is he doing there? He's just kind of like...
He's going through and clearing building by building of vampires.
Right. So he's
trying to kill them all.
He finds a vampire on the street. He puts a stake in him and drives him to the pit where they've been burning these bodies. And we come to find out over the course of the movie that he's a doctor who was, in the before times, that was involved in trying to stop this plague that swept across the planet, became airborne, and killed the entire population as far as he's concerned. This was definitely
in the U.S. because they mentioned there's like, did it go airborne? Did it cross the ocean?
That still
there's a point where they mentioned
could be in Europe though.
No, they specifically mention did this cross? I guess technically it could be like France or something, but no, I'm pretty sure it's in America. I mean, I'm sure we can look it up, but. Yeah. It's not really all that important.
No, it's not.
Sorry.
Thanks for interrupting me.
Hey, bud.
So he spends his days getting rid of all these creatures, ends up running into one of them who's more human-like, right? And it turns out that they've actually retained, they're still alive. They just... Okay, so this is where it gets confusing. Maybe you can help me out. Maybe you're confused about this too. What I understood is that the woman that he comes across basically tells him that they are paralyzed by the sun and they just kind of fall on the ground and they appear to be dead. And he's been clearing out all of these bodies, throwing them in the pit, but they're people who are actually alive and they're very human-like at night. They just can't go out during the day. So he's been killing...
There's two factions of vampires. So there are ones that are just like straight up vampires who do thirst for blood, who want to kill him, who are more simplistic, which are the ones that are always like, Morgan,
right,
we're gonna kill you.
Well, that's specifically his buddy.
Yeah, but they're the ones that are following him around. Are
the
more
relationship of all the people, by the way, are not clear.
No,
there's one guy that says Morgan, and then we see in flashbacks that this is like a young co-worker, but also like family friend of Vincent Price. And then Vincent Price has a very young wife who at certain points I thought was his daughter. And then they have a kid together who looks like it could be his granddaughter.
Well, and then the woman who comes at the end looks a lot like the wife as well.
Yeah. Also, the wife has a picture of herself next to her bed. Just her.
It's super weird. Yeah. But to answer your initial question, there are ones that are more like zombies. The book that this is based off came out 10 years before this movie. The guy who wrote the book actually wrote the screenplay and hated it, and so he was credited as something else in this.
A different name?
As a different name, because
Alan Smithy?
No, they didn't go the Alan Smithy route. It was like Joe Lanesome or something like that. It was like a weird name, but
Joe Lanesome,
something like that. So you have like the ones that are straight up. They're basically zombies, but they call them vampires. And in the book, they're like straight up like vampires. They're faster, stronger, quicker, everything than people, but they have the aversion to garlic and mirrors and religious artifacts. In this, they're basically zombies that don't like garlic or mirrors.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of crosses too.
Right. And they have some intelligence. Yeah. And then there's a subsect that for whatever reason, they were like partially immune or something. So the actual craving for blood and the degeneration of their brain was much slower. Right. And they were able to come up with an injection that prevents them from wanting to consume blood and also keeps their mind. So these people are still infected, but they've basically found a way. It's almost like somebody with HIV with antiviral. They found a way to prevent the virus from spreading. Yeah, exactly.
So this was an interesting thing that I did pick up on at the end of the movie, is that it feels like, I don't know what the movie is trying to say, but okay, so let me back up a little bit. So at the end of the movie, the twist is that he's kind of the villain of the movie because he's been going out.
It's almost like if you took a slasher film and had it from the perspective of like Mike Myers or something like that. He thinks
he's doing the right thing the whole time, and then it turns out that he was killing all these innocent people. So he is the monster at the end of the movie. And that framing sort of makes it feel like he is unintentionally anti-evolution because these people have evolved to function as a society, or some sort of a society with this,
I wonder,
aversion to light or whatever.
I was very, very close to buying the book digitally because it's only like 160 pages, and
a novella.
I got a little too busy yesterday. I almost bought it yesterday morning, and I thought about reading it just to see a little bit. No, not even, just because I wanted to see what was different. But then also, because it was so short, I was like, I can read that in an afternoon, no problem.
Sure.
But also, after watching this version, kind of like what you're talking about, anti-evolution, I actually looked at it, and this is probably through a 2020 lens with everything going on with Black Lives Matters, but I almost looked at it as, could this possibly be like a racial thing? Like, he is the majority, or used to be the majority, and now he sees a new way of life coming, and he doesn't want to coexist, or he can't coexist, and so it's almost like a racial thing. But that could be just a 2020 woke
for
way
Last
of
Man
interpreting
on Earth.
it. For Last Man on Earth specifically, not I Am Legend, maybe in the book, but I thought that could be an allegory for racism or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting
to an extent. So that was my little take on it. Going into the movie, like you mentioned in your little like silly synopsis that he walks around for like 15 minutes. I wrote down the first couple of lines to the movie. So the first one was, the first note I have is unconvincing dead bodies all over the ground.
Woo!
Like, they didn't look real to me.
Yeah.
But it turns out they actually were people. Like, Vincent Price he didn't feel like he can adequately portray moving a body without it being a body. So they actually had, when he's pulling people into the trunk of his car, they were actual people.
I noticed that.
My first note was like, unconvincing dead bodies all over, and then I looked into the movie and I'm like, oh, I guess I was wrong because those were actual people.
Well, I know what you're talking about though, because there was a couple shots where I will still argue that they were fake bodies, but he wasn't interacting with them. They were just like on the ground.
But yeah, those ones definitely looked bad. But I actually specifically was looking at the ones he was pulling into the trunk, and I was like, that doesn't look real at all. And it turns out that absolutely was an actual body he was lifting up. So I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, nope, I'm wrong.
Well, now we can't trust anything else that you say during this whole conversation.
Right? So the first line of the movie is, another day to live through, better get started. And then it's dramatic music. And then it's several minutes of him walking around. And then it says, it's been 3 years. Seems like 100 million. And that, to me, kind of broke this movie, because there's a lot of things that he mentions that doesn't make sense that it's been 3 years. So he goes out, and I think this is from me having like some basic survival skills and having some plans. Like, even before the pandemic started, we had some food ready.
You're a regular Bear Grylls.
Nowhere near that, but we had an emergency kit. We have extra food. Even before the pandemic started, we always had a couple of weeks of extra food just in case something gnarly happened. We were thinking more like an earthquake or something.
Right.
Katrina and I always have at least a half a tank of gas in our car for an emergency purpose. So one of the first things that happens in this movie is when he decides to go out, he sees that the garlic on his
I know exactly what you're saying.
He has no garlic spared, so he has to completely go out that day to get new garlic. He gets into his car. There's no gas. And then he's like driving to the pit to take those bodies, and he sees more, and he's like, well, I don't have time to stop because I need to get gas. Why not get gas first?
Yeah. Why didn't you have
not getting gas like
with
5
you?
times.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
He mentions not getting gas like 5 times. And then, like, we don't see it. We see him do everything but get gas. So I was super confused. Like, out of a bunch of notes, like, why are you not getting gas? Why are you going to the grocery store? And then it never comes up again. So I was really confused.
Yeah, and
but then he
the
goes
beginning
into
of the movie
freezer.
spends a lot of time just watching him walk around and do mundane things, except for the stuff that he said he needed to do.
He says he needs to do. And then he goes to the grocery store, which You see a giant generator in the grocery store. How's that running? I don't know. Whatever. I'll buy it. We see that there's a generator. He's got the giant fridge.
Doesn't he use gas to run the generator?
He must.
So he was in his garage looking at his gas gauge after he just filled the generator thinking, I need gas.
Right.
Weird.
That's what I'm saying. It makes no sense. But then I understand like you can freeze things for a certain period of time, but you can't just leave garlic uncovered in a freezer. Like it's been 3 years. Like there's no way that garlic is still good. Now, granted, they could have got it and moved it, but still, like, why are you not farming that shit?
Yeah, I was going to say an easy fix is that he just has a little farm somewhere, which is what the new one does. And I thought that was pretty
right. Cool. I thought that was great. So, I mean, obviously, we'll get into the new one, but like, how are you not farming this shit? And the thing is, like, my first thing in my mind went like, oh, well, of course the vampires will destroy it, but they can't. Yeah. They can't even get near the garlic. So, grow garlic.
It's a perfect system.
All around the house. Yeah.
Grow garlic around your other crops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can't get to it.
Right.
So that kind of drove me crazy. Like that took me out right away. And that's very nitpicky. But when you're looking at a survival movie, come on.
Right. Well, when we first started talking about this, I was trying to work my way back to this point, and we've gotten sidetracked a little bit, but now we're back here. It was, it's a pretty boring movie, and there's all these little inconsistencies and these things that are just like, all right. And though, they make it less enjoyable, but it also is like a genre movie from 1964, in a similar sense to like Night of the Living Dead, which is a much better movie, I think. But
I agree.
But it's one of the earliest examples of what we recognize as a genre movie now, where, and this is kind of interesting comparing it to I Am Legend, which at this point is 10 years old, or 11 years old, but
13 years old.
Oh yeah, 2007. I was thinking 2009 because the movie it's 2009.
Because the movie takes place in 2009
right.
and 2012. Yeah.
But at any rate, it's interesting comparing these things because that's a very recent example of a genre movie, and you can see how different it is from one of the first examples.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like Last Man on Earth, just kind of has an asterisk. Like it's interesting and enjoyable to the extent that it's an interesting example of. An early genre movie, but yeah, lots of very noticeable stuff to 2020. Yeah,
and it was 80 something, like 83 minutes with the credits, so it wasn't
can't complain about that.
A long movie. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. The other thing,
Vincent Price is just
drove
interesting
me crazy,
to watch too.
I think so too. He's kind of like a prototype to or a precursor to Jeff Goldblum. He's very they're very similar in that they're creepy, but they're fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
The other thing that drove me crazy, and it was just, once again, it wasn't believable that this was 3 years, was he mentions, like, at the end of his first day, or before going out on the first day, and he's like, it feels like it's been 100 million years. He mentions, and I rewound this twice, just to confirm I heard it right, because I was like, there's no fucking way that this is correct. He says that he's only killed 11 of these creatures over the 3 years. But then he goes out to do the gas and everything, and then we see a montage of him kill no less than 5.
So we've got to talk about the killing, by the way, because I was going to get to that. Speaking of not believable stuff, he kills with like
almost no force,
the limpest wrist. And that's not, I'm not making, a sexual thing or a gender thing or whatever. It's so hard to stab somebody when your wrist is flopping around.
So the thing is, what
it's so casual.
Was this movie had a couple things where I'm like, this doesn't make sense, and then they immediately explain it. So when he was on his lathe making the steaks, like they're easier, like you would see it in like Buffy the Vampire Slayer all the time, where they would just take like a wooden thing and then they would just hack off the edge and okay, it's a sharp piece of wood, that'll do the job.
No, he was like crafting it.
He's on a lathe and he makes it like a cone, like a pointy cone.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, I'm like, that is way too wide. Like, why are you doing this? And then immediately he's like, I have to make these steaks this wide because it keeps their seal function, their body seal function.
I know exactly what happened there. They had somebody in our department. They were like, make a bunch of steaks. Like if you would stab a vampire, and the guy was like, all right, whatever. And he made them, and the director looked at it. He's like, what the fuck did you do? This doesn't look anything like what I had in mind. And the guy's like, I don't know what the fuck a vampire is, guy. Like, what are you talking about? And so while they're on set, Vincent Price is like, it's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make up a line, and they have to keep the wound open or whatever. So that's what we're going to do.
which is fine and everything. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll buy that. But then I had the same note about like, how is that effective? Because there's certain times where he just walks up to a vampire that's sleeping and puts the stake, and then but you're right, like both wrists are super limp. Like there's not enough force to crack a human rib cage with this. But then there are other ones where like they will actually, like, they wake up and they scream. They're like, oh shit, I'm gonna die from Vincent Price. And then he still like limply hammers it, and it's like, there's no way that killed a vampire.
To his defense, he makes a big point in this movie about how he's not afraid of these creatures. He's like, oh, they're like an animal that's been through a famine, which is such a weird analogy. But
right.
He says it's like a weak animal. So he's like, he's not worried about taking on one or two of them. He just doesn't want to be caught in a group of them.
Right. And
which is stark contrast to the new movie, which we'll talk about.
Right. Because, we'll get into that. But I laughed at this movie really hard. And everything that I thought was weird, like, got explained when I looked into it. But the other thing, we kind of alluded to it earlier, is there's one zombie vampire, Zompire, I'll call him. Zampire is like, Morgan. Yeah. I found that out before we realized it, because we don't know definitively until the end of the movie when Vincent Price is telling the woman that he finds later on everything. But it was originally, when I was looking at, when I'm doing movies for the podcast, I turn on subtitles, and the first time he talks, it said Ben. And then every time after that, it just said vampire or whatever they put. So I was like, wait, what? And then at the end of the movie, they explicitly say, yeah, this one particular vampire was my friend.
Who, by the way, is definitely fucking his wife. Like, that's that dude.
Oh, for sure. Daughter. That's his daughter. But what was weird about it was, I was like, this voice doesn't make any sense, because we're not exaggerating. Morgan, you hear me?
That's literally it. Are you playing a clip from the movie right now?
Well, it turns out,
do you have a soundboard? That's incredible.
Voices. Was that?
Do you have a soundboard? Is that a clip from the movie? It sounds exactly like it.
This is boop. Yep. But it turns out like that voice was dubbed.
No surprise there.
Yeah. So all the zombie voices were just mouthing or didn't speak English apparently. So they just dubbed all the voices that weren't Vincent Price apparently.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of Italian last names in the credits.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah, this was all dubbed. So I was like, that explains why it sounds hokey and goofy and didn't quite match what was going on. But God, this movie, I don't know really what else to talk about. There are weird. This guy was supposed to be working on the cure, but he's also not a very good scientist. Where he was just like immediately dismissive of everything. He's like,
he's not very good at anything.
This could be airborne. There's no way this could be airborne. And then he's got his friend Ben, who's also his neighbor / probably fucking his wife. But he does this. He has this thing where he's like, yeah, I heard that the dead are coming back, and that maybe they're not actually dead, but they're coming back, and they have these weird issues with garlic and everything. And Vincent Price is like, nope, that's not a thing. And the guy's like, dude, we don't know anything about this. You said it couldn't be airborne, and now we know it is airborne. So come on. And it turns out he was 100% right.
This feels like one of these things with 2020 where we used to watch movies in 2018 and think, oh, that's not how people would react in real life. This horror movie is full of shit. And now we're in a horrific scenario, and it's like, oh, this is exactly how people act.
Yeah.
Fuck.
If we had a zombie like a zombie apocalypse, half the population would be the people in the zombie movies who get bitten and then hide it and then cause trouble later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Vincent Price does with his little daughter,
with his wife. He's a hypocrite.
Friend's kid. Yeah, he tells her to hide this kid that's infected, who infects the wife. And does he try to hide her too?
Yeah. So what happens is, and this is once again where like this guy is not very smart, but the uncle, father, neighbor, best friend guy says something along the lines of he's talking about how they have to burn the bodies, and then the wife is asking about it, and she's like, yeah, Ben says they're burning the bodies to prevent them from coming back to life, and Vincent Price is like, no, they're fucking idiots. It's to prevent the virus from spreading. Like, burning the body prevents virus from spreading. But then he goes and buries his wife. So he buries the wife as opposed to reporting it to the authorities. And she comes back and attacks him, and he has to kill his wife.
Which is one of the best visual moments of the movie, by the way. When the
I
wife
agree.
Comes back.
I thought that part was interesting. It was weird how long the flashbacks were. Like they were like 15 to 20 minute flashbacks.
Yeah.
In a movie that's only 80 minutes, like half the movie was a weird flashback that didn't really move the plot forward.
Yeah, it was strange. It felt like a very deliberate plot device that's different than a normal flashback. It felt like the movie was being told, you know, almost the way that like Tarantino will do a movie or something, where it's like, we tell this one chapter and now we're doing something completely different that'll inform this other thing, but also it's just like, it's long and it's just the whole chunk of the movie.
Right.
And I'm not sure that this worked super well.
I don't think it did either.
I think it's the right idea, because the new movie does that too, where it jumps back to tell the story about how this happened and also Will Smith's emotional arc, but they're much shorter, much more traditional flashbacks.
And just to kind of hammer home the point that this guy isn't very good at anything, is he goes to visit his wife's tomb, which, okay, I don't understand how that works, but okay. He goes to a graveyard.
Who has time to build a tomb during a pandemic?
Right. So he goes and visits it, and it just cuts to him waking up. Like he just fell asleep in like on his wife's grave,
and then he goes back home. Why didn't he just like stay there?
Right. I don't know. Like maybe he doesn't feel safer.
Well, I mean,
but he has to.
Just to be clear, the tomb is like it's like not a mausoleum. He's inside of a building. He's inside of a gated building. He didn't need to go home.
Right. Like I understand that, you know, you don't feel safe. You don't know what's around.
Sure.
I understand it. And like you said, he's not afraid of them. So like he runs out and he runs into a couple of them, and he could just push them around. Like these things are.
He says that
very
after
strong.
the fact. So I whatever.
But he just kind of like lightly shoves them. Yeah. But it gets to the point where he gets home, and you look at his home and it's like just a regular house, and like the windows aren't even completely boarded up. It's literally just like two boards making an X, where it's like you could reach into that house.
It's like if a teenager drew a picture of a boarded up house.
Yeah, it's not fortified at all. Like it literally just has the mirror and the garlic on certain things.
But you know, they're very weak. They don't retain human.
But then there is a point where I'm like, can't they just break the mirrors? Like I understand that they can't do the garlic, which is exactly what happens. Like he just breaks the mirror, and then like Ben walks in at a certain point towards the climax of the film. Morgan. So just to cut through the rest of the movie, so we can
wife?
You killed the mother of my child.
Lover. He has a bone to pick.
Cut through the rest of the films so we can get to the next one and all of our other segments. He's just wandering around and he sees a woman, immediately chases her like as a predator. Like grabs her, shakes her. Yeah, he sees her and he just starts sprinting at her, and she freaks out and runs.
Wouldn't you run towards
definitely
somebody?
You'd be like, hey, I want to talk. But then when he chases her down, it's a fairly long chase scene, and then he grabs her and starts shaking.
I felt like he said not to be afraid and stuff. Yeah, the shaking is a real thing. And that happened a couple times. And that's like a very like 50s, 60s Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
Calm down, woman, and like slap her.
Yeah. So he's like,
Airplane.
don't be afraid. And at this point, he doesn't understand why she's afraid of him.
Right.
So he gets her home, and this is what I didn't get. So he explains his backstory, and she's just like, oh, by the way, I'm a spy from this like advanced vampire society who've been watching you, and they're going to come kill you tonight. You should probably run. Like, I don't get why she flipped so easily to being on his side.
Yeah.
Because I don't either. I think they understand that. Like,
I think
they know he's a regular human, and they remember beforehand.
So I'm kind of guessing here because I don't remember if they really said this well enough. But maybe she realized that he didn't realize that he was killing people.
Right, and that makes sense. But she also was just like just took him at his word for that, which fine. But it was just like. Immediately when the
kind of an underwritten character, you might say.
I agree. And just magically as Ben gets in the house, at the same time that Ben gets in the house, her advanced vampire group comes in and starts killing all the vampires outside. They kill Ben. Vincent Price runs away, and then it ends up in some sort of church or something again. And he kills several of them with a handgun, and then he just like he gets cornered, and he's like, you guys are monsters, you guys are mutants, you are worse than I am a real man.
This is why I was saying it's anti-evolution because of that scene.
No, I knew exactly what you meant.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of was like, could this be erasing?
He goes on this whole rant about how he's better than them essentially. And it just feels like, yo, what are you talking about? I mean, even within the movie, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very inconsistent. And that's kind of why it feels like it's something that the filmmakers wanted to include as a message, because it seems so out of place that they're like, we got to make this clear at the end.
Yeah, and they also added this plot that's not in the book. So apparently in the book, the character is just a survivor. Like, he's just a guy who is immune. In this, they ham-fist the reason why he's immune is that he got bitten by a vampire bat when he was in the war. And that's why he thinks he's immune.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, so he's immune. So like
Are you picking that up from watching the movie, or are you picking that up from reading about it afterwards?
No, he straight up says it. It's a line in the movie.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so this is kind of problematic as well. There's a point where she's sleeping and he goes and he like pricks his arm, puts a needle in his arm, pricks her, and like gives her a blood transfusion. He hasn't done any blood tests to know that their blood types are compatible or anything like that.
He's just
freewheeling. He gives her
a
blood transfusion, and like he's like, oh, you're gonna be cured now. I have the cure in my blood. You're gonna be fine. And then like that's like what? Like it doesn't really resolve. Like there's a point where a baby's crying. She's like, everything's gonna be okay. Like maybe the implication is that she can cure them, and I guess that could be slightly where his superiority comes from. Is that I can cure you guys. I didn't know you exist, but he doesn't do any of that.
What's she gonna do to get her blood into everybody else?
Right,
they're like
let's
cave
say
dwellers.
Objectively, they say they have like city and electricity and they have cars and everything. Like, they have a full functioning society.
I must have really tuned out at the end of this movie because I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, no, they explain all of this. But the thing is, it's like you said, if he was at least sympathetic at the end and said, hey guys, I had no idea, but I have a cure. If you want it, I can help you out with it. But like you said, the odds of them being compatible with blood is pretty rare, pretty unlikely. But the odds that everybody else has the same blood type as her, although they can consume blood if they want. So maybe, I don't know. I really don't know.
It just falls apart. Like there's not really, feels like there's not a whole lot of logic to it.
But I think that's pretty much all I've got for this. The dog. We didn't gloss over that. He finds a dog, but it dies like immediately. And they make a big thing about the dog, and I get why a person in his position, and he says it explicitly as well, like, oh, sweet, like a companion. Yeah. And then like the next scene's like, oh, you have the virus. It's just like, you don't even let that marinate at all.
That's
like
a short movie, man.
Yeah, like I wish that was marinated, but that's all I've got for this one. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, my only other note was I thought it was funny when, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, I think the wife wants to send the daughter to school, and the kid's like laying there under a mosquito net or quarantine net, and she's like, "Oh, Papa, I don't feel good." And the mom is like,
the black lung.
Yeah, the mom is like, I'm thinking about sending her to school, and Vincent Price is like, maybe you shouldn't send her to school today. No fucking shit, right, man.
Nobody actually said, hey, we should send her to school, but. Like the mom
he like looks at her, he's like,
and Vincent Price
maybe
walks
we
in,
shouldn't
like,
send her to school today.
Maybe we shouldn't send her to school. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, no fucking shit.
I thought that was a foregone conclusion, guy. Like, what are we still on that? What are you talking about?
Right, but no, like nobody explicitly says, hey, we're gonna send her to school, and he's like, no, that's not a good idea. He just walks in and is like, don't send her to school today.
Yeah, thanks, Gramps.
Thanks.
This is why Ben is in charge of everything.
Yeah,
but you see what happens when people don't wear masks.
Yep. Fucking A.
What's up, Doc? What's cooking? What's up, Doc?
So what have you been up to, bud?
All right, before we get into the 2007 one, I got to ask you, what have you been up to, bud?
So I binged all of Doom Patrol on HBO Max.
Oh, nice. I've been meaning to get on to that one.
Man, that is just a good show.
I've heard it's very good. I've watched the first episode and just haven't gone back to it, but I've heard it's fantastic.
Really, really enjoyed it. It's super fucking weird. It's got a really solid emotional core. Like I feel like I resonate with all the characters basically.
The cast is great.
Cast is fantastic. Brendan Fraser is fucking killing it.
I've heard he's fantastic in it.
Yeah.
You got Timothy Dalton, Matthew Bomer. I fucking love that guy. I think he's an underappreciated actor.
Cyborg is so much better than the Justice League Cyborg.
It looks corny, but I've heard he's fantastic. And then
the
Alan Tudyk is in it too, right?
Mm-hmm. The corniness doesn't even bother me. Like, it's just a different look. and it looks a little bit cheaper, but yeah, it does. I mean, if the argument is that the Doom Patrol cyborg looks cheap, I would argue that the Justice League cyborg looks overly CG.
Oh, I hate them. I wish
terrible.
there was like a middle ground between those two.
I wish he wasn't in the fucking movie. Like, I don't.
Yeah, well,
need
he
Justice
shouldn't have been. He
League.
didn't
I don't
add
need
anything to
Cyborg
Justice
be in
League.
Yeah, why
Yeah,
not
I
Martian
agree.
Manhunter, Green Lantern? But
Yeah, I agree.
I digress. Doom Patrol is fantastic, and it also, I said it's weird. It's like unapologetically fucking weird, and it's awesome.
I've heard that.
It also deals with a lot of like mental health issues and like stuff that comes up with like therapy and stuff. And it's just it's a thing that I don't feel like is in superhero shows at all, let alone a lot of other,
Right.
TV shows. So it's
Just
kind of an
media in
interesting,
general.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to see.
I think
dealt
I'm going
with.
to commit to checking that out this week because I watched the first episode a while back when I had a trial for DC Online, and then something happened. I just didn't take advantage of that trial, so
Yeah, it was cool.
I'll find a way to watch it. And I've been meaning to. You're like the third person this week to tell me that they watched it this week and that they loved it.
Yeah. What else? I've been mostly watching that. So I also rewatched Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, which is funny because I thought that the last time that I watched it was when it came out in December, and I forgot that I actually watched it in May. And then I started it last week and I was like, oh, I've seen this very recently. So
Right.
I think that tells you something. I don't even hate the movie. I just, just very
I hated that.
forgettable.
One. I didn't hate 8, but I hated 9.
I watched Batman Under the Red Hood, which was actually worse than
That
Rise of
one's good.
Skywalker.
I've seen
No.
that one.
Didn't like it.
Oh,
Silly.
okay.
I
I mean,
just played.
it is silly for it's a cartoon, but I think for an animated comic book thing that's straight to DVD, I think it's pretty solid.
I just played the Arkham Knight games, as we've talked about.
That's true.
and,
You have that
and it-
story already down.
and it kind of deals with a similar thing. I think that's a better origin for Red Hood. And then just comfort stuff. Last night I watched Doctor Strange and Walk Hard. The day before that.
The Dewey Cox story.
Yeah, man. Both of those are real solid. I want to have a
We,
conversation with you at some point about Walk Hard versus Popstar.
Oh, maybe we can do that on one of our topic episodes down the line. Do like pop star. Oh, I don't like that would be like the Justin Bieber one. I don't really want to watch that, but maybe we do like those two movies and Walk the Line. And I don't know. That could be interesting.
You don't want to watch Popstar?
I wouldn't mind. I'd watch Popstar again, but I don't want to watch the Justin Bieber one that Popstar is the spoof of.
Oh.
Because that's
Justin
supposed to be
Bieber,
like the
documentary?
Yeah, Justin Bieber
Okay,
did,
I understand.
it was Never Stop Believin' or some shit like that,
Gotcha,
which is
gotcha,
why
gotcha.
this one's called Never Stop Stoppin' or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I mean, the Justin Bieber one wouldn't enter into this conversation for me because I thought we were talking about just parody documentaries.
Yeah, we can. We should absolutely find a way to make that work because I've kind of been wanting to watch the Popstar one or the Lonely Island one again.
What have you been watching?
So I remember finally what last episode when we were recording, I couldn't remember one of the things that I watched that I actually wanted to discuss with you because it's right in your wheelhouse. So this is actually what have I been doing from the previous episode, but I finally got around to watching Midsommar.
Oh, cool.
And I hated it.
Yeah.
But I also didn't I'm not a big horror guy. I don't dislike horror films. Like there are plenty that I like, but I also don't like the ones that are just disturbing for the sake of being disturbing. So I hated Hereditary. And I put off watching this one for a long time because I hated Hereditary. I just thought it was disgusting and gross and disturbing. And I know that's part of the film. Katrina loved Hereditary. I hated it. Midsommar, I thought was beautiful. It was wonderfully shot. I didn't dislike it as much as Hereditary, but I hated the scene when the old people jumped off the cliff and then you just see their heads hit the rock and then like over and over the hammer. Like I thought that was a bit excessive. Yeah. I think if it was just the once, seeing the woman hit the rock, like that was a little too much for me. But if it was just that one shot, but if it wasn't the constantly going back, I don't think it would have been as bad. I don't think it's as disturbing as Hereditary, but I could have gone without watching it, honestly.
I enjoyed watching it. We're talking about things being unapologetically weird, and there's a scene in that where the guy I think finds pubes in his food, and he also drinks something that has menstrual blood in it.
Yep.
Which that's fucking awesome. I actually like that a lot.
That stuff didn't bother me because it was foreshadowed. Like you saw it in the tapestries as they walked by. So I was like, oh, I get what's happening.
I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed a lot of that movie, but I think that it was similar to Hereditary. I think that it wasn't worth the hype that people were putting on it.
I agree. Absolutely. So I did watch that. Other thing, and this is something that I'm highly recommending to all of our listeners. I had a friend of mine recommend Dave on FX, and it's also on Hulu.
Isn't Dave also like a Kevin Kline movie or something?
Yeah, there is a one like that too, Dave, from like the 80s or something. It's the one where he like takes over as the president.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good
because
movie.
he looks like the president. No, it's a great movie.
I think early 90s actually.
Yeah, and that.
Sorry, I'm
when he was in
hijacking
his
your
when he was in his peak. Oh, it's totally fine. When he was at his like peak, being in a lot of things.
Fish
But
Called Dave.
Dave is a an extreme loose semi autobiographical TV show made by the rapper Lil Dicky. And I had a friend recommend it to me, and I was
None
like,
of the
"This
words
looks
you
pretty
just
dumb."
said to me make sense.
Yeah. So it's a white, or it's a Jewish guy who grew up in upper middle class out in Philadelphia.
Okay.
He was actually originally in like advertising, and he was trying to get into like writing scripts for TV and movies, and he just couldn't get his foot in the door. So he found out that he's actually a pretty good rapper, and like legitimately, I've started listening to Lil Dicky rap after watching the show, and like legitimately, he is a fantastic rapper. Like the way he structures things, his rhymes, they're silly, but it's very tight, and it's not overproduced, but it's very good rap, very good flows. This is a white guy talking about rap. But anyway,
let's talk about our favorite rappers after this.
The show is the first couple episodes. I'm like, this is okay. It's kind of dumb, but it's okay. But Katrina's been really busy the last few weeks doing some acting classes and some stuff with her union. And I've had a lot of time. So I just stuck through it and I powered through. And I think it was like episode 4 where it kind of clicked. And there's only one season out. It's 10 episodes overall. But season 4, it started to click. And it's kind of like what you brought up with Doom Patrol. They actually have episodes where they focus entirely on mental health issues. There's an entire episode that revolves around a character that has bipolar disorder and what that actually means and how it affects people. And the people around him didn't realize he had it, but when they find out, like, they support him and like he becomes family because they had no idea. So it actually brought them closer, and I thought that was a really great message. But then as the show gets going, the last 2 episodes, legitimately some of the funniest shit I've ever seen in my life. I have not laughed that hard in years. Wow. Like, I was laughing so hard watching it in the living room. Katrina was on a Zoom call in the bedroom, and she was saying that like people could hear me laughing, and it sounded like I was laughing in the room. I was laughing that hard. I was dying. And which
is funny because I can hear Katrina laughing right now.
Yeah. I've probably recommended the show to no less than like 15 people over the last week and a half, like just random friends and family, people on Facebook. It is honestly probably, after the last 2 episodes, is in my top probably 20 favorite TV shows of all time now, just because of 2 episodes at the end. So can't recommend that highly enough. Found a place to watch The Good Place season 4, so we're watching that as well. Yeah. And we were watching that Zac Efron documentary series on Netflix.
I don't know anything about that. I just saw that his dad bod was going viral. Which is not a dad bod.
The thing is, it's funny, he's still pretty ripped in it. Like, he doesn't have a dad bod. Like, he's a little thicker than he normally is, but he's still fucking
It's a dad bod.
Yeah. Like, it's his version of a dad bod because he still has like a 6-pack. That's fucking weird.
Dad bod.
But he, the basic premise of the show is he recognizes that he comes from a place of privilege, and that he realized by being famous, he should learn about ways to make the world better. And he went through it on a lens of what are things we can be doing from an ecological standpoint to be better, learning about where food comes from and how we're preserving food and all these, like DNA labs, so we can keep all the strains just in case there ever is a pandemic with, crops. So it's this guy who literally knows nothing about the world. Like, this guy he's dumb. Like, he is not a smart man, but he seems to be, and I don't say this in it with any kind of malicious thing. Like, he himself, like, when you see him learning things, you can like see the gears clicking in his, turning awesome. In his head, and you can see him understanding things, and him, like, he's open to leaving his preconceived notions about how the world works and learning about how things actually work. So like, he's talking about like, I had no idea this is what it took to get food here. I had no idea that we can build a city that's 100% green off of this stuff and everything. And so it's like, he's learning, and you can see it, and you can see his mind being blown
I love
constantly.
that.
He's not a good host. There's so many times where it's awkward, where the people he's with and interviewing don't really understand where he's coming from, or things go over their heads or things go over his head. But it's so endearing because you see this person who's really trying to learn and be a better person. And this is something like he has the means to do this and a platform to do it. And he's using his platform to become a better person. So it's by no means is it highbrow. I haven't learned a ton, but it's very fascinating to see this man travel the world and just learn about the world and learn about things he had no idea were going on. So I recommend that a lot too.
I think intellectual curiosity is awesome.
I think it's great. And I have a much deeper respect for him as a person after watching him in this show. So that's
awesome.
what I've been up to.
I'll have to check that out.
All right. I
Should
Am
we
Legend.
dive into the saddest fucking movie ever now?
Yep. So I guess I'll get this one. So if I'm pitching this in an elevator, I'm going to up to the exec and say, hey, I want to remake Omega Man and Last Man on Earth. We have the special effects to do it now. We've got Will Smith interested. This is going to be great. It's just Will Smith by himself pretty much the entire movie. And it's a post-apocalyptic pandemic film. He's a scientist trying to find a cure. And he's suffering through all his mental illness. You see him setting up all these traps, trying to kill these zombie vampire monster rage monster things. I don't even know how to describe these things.
He's not even trying to kill them though. He's using them to experiment to save them.
Yeah,
just to help them.
He wants to save them because he's a viral specialist, and he has this chip on his shoulder because he feels responsible for what happened. And it's just him coping with being what he thinks is the last man on Earth, and him slowly losing his grip to life and everything. He loses his only companion, and right as he thinks there is no hope, he finds hope in the form of a couple extra survivors.
Yeah,
and that's the gist of it.
Well done.
And I loved this movie when it came out. I own it. I had the collector's edition on DVD. I watched it. It came out, I think, while I still worked at the movie theater. It came out the year that I left, but I remember liking it. I've watched it a handful of times over the couple of years. It's probably been at least 10 years since I've watched it. I think I think there's a lot of good things in here. There are a lot of things that don't work in this movie, but I think there's a lot of things that do well. And I think you hit it on the head. And when you were saying that it's really, 40, 50 years of evolution of a particular genre, where you can see where even though this isn't the most amazing movie in the world, it took a lot of the things that the Vincent Price version started and ran with it and improved on it. So I actually liked it more than I thought I was going to after watching the original version. I went in expecting to shit on this movie and think it's bad because I see people shit on this online all the time. And I'm like, man, was this movie not good? Do I remember it incorrectly? And I thought it was a perfectly serviceable film.
I loved it. I think I liked it quite a bit more than you did, actually. I didn't go into it thinking that it was going to be bad, but I feel like this is a funny sentence. I remember it being forgettable, and I think it's a lot better than I remembered it being. I actually I'm interested to see what you think doesn't work, because I don't really have any issues with the movie besides the CG on the vampires aging poorly.
It's that. I think
that's the only thing, and that doesn't ruin the movie for me.
At the point when this movie came out at the time, I was like, why did they do this? It does not. Yeah. It didn't seem necessary. And then the other things was, it's like, I understand that they mutated and everything, so it makes sense that they lost all their hair and they lost their pigmentation, but their jaw, it was almost like the Mummy. Yeah. I think like their jaws extend way too much. I think they went a little too far.
I think it's a studio note that got through.
Yeah, I think they didn't look like they used to be humans. I think they just look like weird demon monsters.
Well, there's one point where towards the end where the alpha monster picks up Will Smith with his jaw and lifts him with his mouth and flips him onto a table,
throws him around and everything. Yeah, that was one of the notes I had. I'm like
he's a wolf or something.
There's no way he survives that. Like, it would be
Which
ripping
one?
Flesh off it.
It's just not physically possible. Like, humans don't have that bite force.
I will buy to an extent that, this affected their myosin and actin, which is what causes muscles to contract. Maybe they have more myosin, so it makes the muscle contractions much stronger and forceful. Something. I don't know. I'm willing to be hand wave that they're stronger and faster.
Yeah.
and everything. But what I can't hand wave is if I will give him that his bite strength is strong enough to hold him. What I won't give you is that Will Smith's neck is strong enough not to just be torn apart and have his throat bitten out.
Yeah. And also just like the way that human mouths are made, they go, I'm doing this on the screen so the audience can't hear, but they just go up and down. There's no depth,
Right.
as opposed to like
Not
a
much.
wolf's snout where there's 6 inches of space where you can bite and hold something. Tendons.
There's
and
not
shit.
a lot.
It doesn't make sense.
That stuff doesn't work. And it's what I appreciated more about this movie this time around.
Let me just interject. It doesn't work, but it does not ruin the movie for me.
I don't think it ruins the movie overall. No, I do think, and we'll talk about it because we were talking briefly before we started recording. We were like, "Why are we talking now? Let's just record and then we'll get into it." But I mentioned that there's a director's cut version,
right,
or an extended cut. So I think the director's cut or the extended version is a better version of the film.
You said the end is different, right?
It's literally just the last 2 minutes of the movie.
All right. So what happens in the last 2 minutes?
So in the end of this movie, he finds another survivor finds him and basically says, "Hey, there's a colony out in Maine. We want to bring you because we know you're the best chance of getting a real cure. Come with us." And, they're there for a day before, the monsters or creatures, I think they call them dark seekers, show up and destroy the place. And so in the version that we watched, the theatrical version, they get into the house, they go down into the lab, and Will Smith gets them to hide in the fireplace or something like that. And he sacrifices himself with a hand grenade and kills all the dark seekers that got into the house. And then there's there's a voiceover of her saying, of this woman, Anna, who's the one that saves him, and the kid going "Hey, he was the last real man. He was a legend," or something like that. And then it shows her arrive at a gated area, and we're like, "Okay, cool. There's a colony."
Yep.
The actual ending that they shot, and apparently it didn't test well, so the studio made them change it, which in retrospect, I don't care what test audience says, you should let the creatives create. But in the theatrical, or the unrated or director's cut version, whatever you want to call it.
Sorry, I'm going to interject. That's funny that you said that because that ties directly into the conversation we had before
I know.
we aired.
There, to an extent, Alex
I hear
and I
you.
were arguing.
We don't have to go back into it.
We'll go brief. We were arguing about method acting, and we've talked about it on the podcast on one of our episodes together already. I personally think method acting is lazy to an extent. It's not lazy because you put in work, but Alex was just saying, he thinks actors should be able to do whatever the fuck they want on set. That's an oversimplification.
Yeah,
that's not true.
You're making me sound like an asshole.
Yeah.
But our disagreement was where the line is.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Daniel Day-Lewis making people call him Abe and not wanting to have cell phones either in his eye line or on set at all. And what Mike and I were arguing about is where exactly that line is. Neither one of us thinks that Jared Leto should be putting used condoms into Margot Robbie's trailer or terrifying Shelley Duvall or, putting real birds on what's her face from The Birds.
From Birds.
All of that is obviously right. Obviously wrong, and nobody should be doing that. But, if somebody wants to be called a different name, or they don't want to see a cell phone in their place of work where theoretically people aren't supposed to be using cell phones that much anyway, I don't think that's that big of an ask.
Yeah. So
anyway.
Yeah, that's funny. But anyway, so the original ending of this was a little bit more in line with Last Man on Earth and a little bit closer to the book, where they realize that Will Smith's character, you see the same, you called him the alpha, that I think that's what he's credited as well, but there's this one dark seeker that you see multiple times that acts funny. He exposes himself to the sun on purpose. He's actually tamed some infected dogs and everything. And so the whole movie, we're like, why is this guy special? But in the version we saw and we watched, the theatrical version, there's no explanation to why this creature is more advanced or anything special compared to the other ones. In the original version, it turns out that Will Smith abducts a dark seeker fairly early in the film and is doing experiments on her. It turns out this was the alpha female. This was his mate. And so the whole movie, it's not that he actually cares about killing Will Smith. It's just he wants his wife back. So at the end of the movie, when they're hiding in that little glass, that safety glass room that the monster's like breaking down, Will Smith starts to figure it out. He looks at the girl that he abducted and then looks at him. And then the monster draws through the steam on, like he's like fogging up the glass. He draws a butterfly because the one that he abducted had a tramp stamp. And then Will Smith's like, oh shit, these guys are not, they are simpler than I am, but their humanity's not completely gone. They still have emotion. They have some cognitive shit. So he actually like opens up the glass and like lets them take the woman, and then they leave and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
and that's
better because you have that twist that he's like, oh, I'm a monster to them, which is what the end of The Last Man. I think that's a more effective ending, but apparently people at the time couldn't see Will Smith as a bad guy, and it made them feel bad about Will Smith being a bad guy, so they changed it.
Yeah, which sucks because that's, something like that is what makes it interesting and makes you want to talk about it. If you try to satiate the test audiences, you end up with this homogenized bullshit. It's what George Costanza was talking about.
Right. So we haven't really talked much about the movie, but like one of the things that I loved about this movie, and I liked it the first time I saw it, but today or yesterday when I watched this, it felt even more impressive. It was almost like a case study on a man's psyche breaking down because he's in isolation. Yeah. Where he has...
Can we just say that Will Smith kills it? He's fantastic in this.
He puts in a fucking incredible performance in this film.
He's so good, man.
And that's hard to do when you're not working with anybody. You're you're on your own. So he has this whole thing where what I thought was interesting, I didn't really think about it until today when I was reviewing my notes, but he does things where he sets his, he looks at the farmer's almanac, so he sees what time the sun's going to set. He has his routine. He goes out, he sets, traps so he can try to find, people he can experiment on. But he also goes to like a video store and is going through a movie. And he mentioned he has a mannequin set up so he can pretend to talk to people. It's crazy. It's fucking insane.
But it's also something that makes sense that you have to do
mechanism.
That
like you need to have some
sanity.
sort of. So he does that, and then he mentions to like the clerk that he's halfway through G's. A lot of people would have just gone in and taken a fuck ton of movies home, and left.
He has his routine.
But he has his routine, and he has this. I need some sort of social interaction, so he fakes these social interactions. The other
he's
thing
got mannequins that he's set up.
Right.
And then
the thing that I also thought was interesting is he has this woman who's standing by the adult film section, and he's always kind of looking at her and like out of the corner of his eye. And he has this dog, and he's always like talking to the dog, like, nah, what am I even going to say to her? And then when his dog dies, which is gut wrenching, that he goes into the video store basically crying, and he goes to the adult film section. So it's almost like he was trying to inhibit that part of his humanity. And now it's like, I'm going over to the adult porn. I'm going to go look at porn now. And then he starts talking to the mannequin. He's like, just say something to me. Please, 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 please say something to me.
That's funny that you latched onto the porn thing, because I didn't think about that at all.
Yeah. It's just, I think it's interesting that his love interest, quote unquote love interest, is a mannequin, and it's over by the adult film section. I thought that was something that he was trying to stay away from that. And he was getting to the point where it's like, man, maybe I'm going to watch some porn. And then his dog leaving is like, I need something. Like, not that he needs to go jerk off.
Didn't think about any of that at all. I think he just went over to talk to his love interest, quote unquote.
I think in that moment he just went over to talk to her, but I think that mannequin was over by that section specifically to make that interaction awkward. Like, oh, you're not going to go talk and everything. So I don't necessarily think he was going over there to look at porn, but I think that was something in the back of his head that someday he'd have to do that, or it hits an awkward, funny interaction to bump into somebody while looking at porn at a store. But I thought that was really interesting. Right. But I thought,
I think his coping mechanism's super well done, super, super interesting.
Did you notice the mannequins moving?
Just the one, just Fred.
I didn't notice it. I could. No, he's in a couple different. Fred's in a couple different scenes because the Dark Seekers moved the mannequin at a certain point. Right. I was looking for the movement, but I didn't notice.
No. Well, that's what I'm saying. Fred. So there's a scene where he sees that Fred has been moved. He drives by, the was it not Grand Central Station?
Whatever. Is that the library?
No, it's a train station that they used in the Avengers. I can't remember what the name is because I'm not from New York. Anyway, he drives by the train station and sees that Fred has been moved, And in the shot, there's like a shot of him looking, and then in the reverse shot where we see Fred, you see his head move very slightly. That's the only time that I noticed.
I must have
the
looked
mannequin
down
move.
right as it happened, because I was looking
Yeah.
for it and I didn't see it. But I thought
Yeah, it
that
was
was
cool.
interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
I looked that up. I was like, oh, that's cool. Apparently, some of the other mannequins, like that's the one that a lot of people noticed, but apparently other mannequins were humans too, but the movements were less obvious.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me want to go back and look for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wrote down that the first 15 minutes of this movie, not the first 15, I guess it was a little bit shorter. I think it's more than 5, but less than 10. But the first scene in this movie is him driving around not abandoned, but New York with nobody around. And, it's obviously setting the stage for the story and blah, blah, blah. But what he's doing is hunting these, deer or gazelle or whatever.
Deer. I think they were deer.
He's hunting them through ruined New York, and he finally gets one away from the pack, and him and Sam, the dog, are about to he's got a gun, he's about to shoot it. Sam's not going to shoot it because he's a dog. She's a dog.
She is a dog.
And out of nowhere, this female lion knocks over the deer and takes it down. And you see Will Smith for like a full minute or so debate whether he wants to kill this lion and take the deer because he needs to eat too, and probably just also like hunting occupies him and stuff. And he sees the dad lion and the cubs come over. There's like 2 cubs with him, and it's just this whole silent moment of him debating whether or not to engage with this family of lions over their dinner and what could be his dinner. It was just fascinating. I think it's fascinating to think about what he's thinking about. And he ultimately decides not to do it. And I swear to God, it feels like the dad lion, like they have a moment where they're just kind of looking at each other. It feels like the dad lion is like, hey man, we're just trying to live here. And Will Smith is like, all right, we're cool. And then he turns around and walks away, and the lions are like, thanks man. All right, well, we're going to eat this. You get the next one. Yeah. So the first like scene of this movie, just feels like its own contained short film that beautifully sets up the rest of the movie. It feels like what a lot of young directors are doing in Hollywood now, or just in film, not necessarily in Hollywood, but they'll do a proof of concept. And that's kind of what this feels like. It just tells you, it tells a contained story and has a little emotional arc on a little payoff, but it hints at bigger things.
No, it's definitely a very effective open to the film.
It was just super well done, super cool. I really, really enjoyed that. And the first half of the movie is kind of like that too, actually. Like up until the point where Sam runs into the Dark Seeker's lair.
Yeah,
it's all just very silent and him exploring.
Yeah, you mentioning the silence. So I obviously A Quiet Place a few years back, made a ton of waves for it being a mostly silent film, and sound in that movie is very important. But this time around, I kind of noticed the same thing. Like when the movie was starting, before you even saw the Mustang, there's a good probably minute of you just seeing, the ruins of New York, and you're hearing birds, and you're hearing crickets, and you're hearing little rustling in the grass. And I thought that was a really effective way to use sound. And there's a lot of quiet. Like you mentioned, the Dark Seeker lair that he goes into because his dog ran in there. It's
the tension
very,
in
very
that
quiet.
scene, the tension in that scene where he's walking around the lair looking for his dog, and you can there's no music or anything. All you hear is him breathing and the sounds of him walking and stuff in this in this building. And it's so effective. I mean, there's a ton of other stuff going on in that scene that makes it effective, but the sound's a big part of it. It's so tense.
Well, and him covering the light and everything, and then the almost no audio. Like there's no score in this movie. There's very little score in this. There's so many scenes that there's no music at all, and I think it's very, very effective.
Yeah. I want to say again, this movie I think is a lot better than it gets credit for. It should be talked
I think
about
so
more,
too.
and it's not.
I agree, and I think that people should watch. I think the original cut is a better cut, but even this version I do think is very good. I think it's just the last few minutes aren't great. I don't think it sticks the landing spectacularly, but it's a very Hollywood ending. It doesn't wipe out. It's just, I don't think it's necessarily a satisfying ending, but it's not a bad ending. It's not a terrible way to end the film.
Yeah. We said we weren't going to bring this up, but we're talking about like Justice League and Suicide Squad, all these movies that are all these DC movies that are getting director's cuts that
It's funny, this is the same studio.
Debatable whether or not they need it. I would be interested in this movie. I don't even know how it would work. It wouldn't be worth it for the studio at all, but I would like to see a version of this movie where they change the character models for the vampires. I wish that they hadn't done what they did
apparently
with the
they
vampires.
did. They had people on set, but apparently it was laughable. And it's like, well, don't CG it, just get better makeup. Like, there are enough good practical effects out there for makeup, especially with vampires, that you can find a way.
That movie came out at a funny time because Marvel has perfected the art of painting over real actors now. And I'm not even talking about like Rocket Raccoon. I'm talking about like the Winter Soldier's arm, that kind of stuff that could be achieved practically. And a lot of elements are, but they just give it a very believable CG pass. Not even a sheen. I wouldn't even call it a sheen. They give it a pass that I guess it is a sheen. Fuck. But it feels like this is a very early version of that, and if this movie had come out 5 years later, it would have been very different.
Yeah, and obviously you've only been with our podcast for like 4 or 5 months now, and this is something we used to talk about a lot. For some of the other movies we've covered, your Clash of the Titans is an episode we did, and this movie came out around the same time, within a couple of years. This was a period of time where CG was getting incredibly good. If you used it sparingly, it could look incredible. And
there's
I think
obviously
this was a time
CG,
where we started overusing it. And
there's obviously CG on all of the New York locations. Like, they didn't plant a bunch of weeds in the middle of Times Square, but there's definitely CG in there.
There are in certain places, so they only had a few places
that's what I'm
they
saying.
were able to close down.
Yeah, like there's some of that technology, or it's not even technology, it's the mix of practical and CG existed.
Exactly, there's a balance.
Just like, I think, and this goes back to what I said before, I think that the studio needed the monsters. They thought that they needed the monsters to look a specific way and to be a certain level of scary. And that just feels like a studio note that got through, and it was predictably bad. And they like overshot how scary the monsters needed to be. Yeah. And it makes it more of a forgettable movie, which is sad.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing, and this is more me just being at one point wanting to be a doctor and knowing certain things, but like I thought it was funny that Emma Thompson was in this movie for just a minute.
Yeah, she's first 5 minutes of the movie. Yeah, or not even.
She's a scientist who invents a cure for cancer using the measles virus to do that. And it's like several years later, the virus she created to attack cancer mutated. I don't think measles was the right virus. Like I feel like rabies would have been a more appropriate.
They said something about rabies later on.
Did they?
Yeah,
I must have missed
people ended up getting rabies or whatever.
Oh, got it. Because I'm like, how does this virus, like measles doesn't do any of the shit that these, it doesn't make people, I mean, rabies would have made more sense. So, but I thought it was interesting that they got someone like Emma Thompson for this, like basically a glorified cameo. And I love her. I'm glad. I thought so too. Cause I think she's I think she's an incredible actress, and she has her accolades, but I do think she's an underappreciated actress.
She did some subtle things in that little opening monologue. It's like a TV interview, that like some acting choices that I really appreciated, and that's why you hire somebody like that.
Yeah, I thought that performance was fantastic.
You just get people right in the beginning,
Yeah, when they ask her like, you cured cancer, and she like, there's a hesitation. She's like, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I did.
She like stutters. Yeah, she stutters a little bit.
Like the way she did it was, it's like she knows that she did something incredible, and she's not used to not being humble. I thought that was, I think you're right. She made some great choices, and I think that when you have very few actors in the movie, it's easier to spend a little bit more on a fantastic actor for something small. Now, granted, this movie was super expensive. It was like $200 million. They actually were able to shut down parts in New York. Apparently, Will Smith said it was one of the hardest things he did, because every day he was shooting, people were flipping him off and cursing him because when you can't close a street in New York without fucking
So-
a lot of people over.
This is another interesting thing where you're talking about how inconvenient it is for Daniel Day-Lewis to tell people not to use their cell phones and to call them by a different name. We're talking about this movie where it wasn't Will Smith's decision, but the movie production shut down New York and inconvenienced actual people who have nothing to do with the movie.
I don't like. I agree. I would be pissed if I were them too. It's tricky. I have it like our house or where we live. I think one of the houses near us is like an exterior for like a Modern Family or something, because
this is a
everything was up
regular
and running.
occurrence in LA.
Yeah, it was a regular thing. Like every couple of weeks, streets near us would be closed.
Yeah.
because they were filming, and it's
in the
it's
before
very inconvenient.
times that's happened at every place that I've lived. Like there's always a shutdown somewhere. That's just LA life.
But I do think it's, LA is different. Like New York, it's not a normal thing for a ton of things to shoot on location in New York for that period of time. They even shut down the Brooklyn Bridge and hired like 1,000 extras for that scene when they were getting his family out.
I'm going to get off this topic because we could talk about this for an hour and it has nothing to do with the movie. I like that they blew up the bridges. That was cool to see.
Yeah,
and
I
know
thought that was great.
I know they did in Dark Knight Rises, but
Yep.
that's like, feels like it's a very effective thing that we don't see very often. And I forgot that it happened in this movie.
Yeah,
so
I forgot
when
that
happened. I
happened
was like,
as well.
oh yeah. And they really like when he's hanging out at the pier, there's a shot in the first act that like really focuses on the bridge being blown up. It's the first time we see it, and that, it's the point of the shot. But it was cool. I was like, oh fuck, like the government like really fucked this up. They cut off the entire island, like literally. That's insane.
Yeah.
Did you notice, by the way, that I think I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. That pier that he goes to every day, that he tells people to meet up with him at, is the last place that he saw his family.
I think
that's where they were taking off in the helicopter.
I think that's the implication. It's also where he
they don't
went
talk
to
about
go.
that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's also why he chose to go kill himself there.
Yeah.
Which
I thought that was cool.
I don't really want to talk about the dog scene because it's just depressing.
Nope.
But it's very effective. I
Very
love
well
that dog, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
That was a good dog. But,
she was a good dog.
Do I have anything else?
They did John Wick before John Wicked.
How so?
Dead dog. He goes on a revenge
Oh,
rampage.
yeah. I did. That's funny. One of the things this movie is most famous for is that the Batman Superman logo, and everyone's like, "Oh my god!"
That was on my note too. I was wondering. I was going to see if you brought that up before me.
Yeah, it's like whatever. I remember that was a big deal when I saw that. I was like, "What?"
Okay, I have a little nitpick with that, and you probably didn't notice this. There's a date on the Batman Superman poster.
It was like
You know what it
May
is?
5th or something like that. I don't remember what year.
I think it was 2012, and it didn't bother me until I realized that the movie takes place in 2000. It takes place in 2012, but the world has been shut down for 3 years. So when did that poster go up? It didn't go up 3 years before the movie came out.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it. In fact, it's such a famous image, we can probably find it pretty easy. I think you get shit like that every once in a while when like maybe when they just announced it, like, oh, Comic-Con just happened. I can see maybe them doing that. But it was supposed to be, apparently it was just supposed to be a dig at the screenwriter, Akiva Goldman. He actually wrote a Batman v Superman movie like 5 years prior to this. Probably. Well, he's hit or miss. Like he has some great movies and he has some really not good movies. But
that's just a dig at the one that we got.
Apparently, it was a dig at him. And then, of course, we got that movie and it was terrible.
Yeah.
One of the only other really thing. I don't really have anything else. I don't want to talk about things that are too sad. I did thought it was it's his fault the dog died. And I'm mad at him for it. Because the whole reason they got in that situation is he falls for one of his own traps that the monsters tricked him into doing by putting the mannequin there.
That was a note that I made. I didn't realize until this viewing that the monsters copied his trap, and I thought that was a really nice touch.
I don't even think they copied the trap. I think they just moved a mannequin to one of his traps, knowing that he's not all there anymore and that he would freak out because they've been watching him. Because I don't think they have the ingenuity to do that.
I don't think that but I think that's the point. And you're talking about like the monster wanting his girlfriend back or whatever. I think this is a holdover from that. I think there's still a little bit of humanity.
I think there's some stuff up there, but I do think it's one of his traps. I don't recall him.
I don't recall him setting up traps and leaving them around. We watch him set up a trap specifically to get one of the monsters from the hive that we see him investigate, but I don't remember seeing him set up traps.
But how would they know how to do the trap, where to get the, like,
I assume that they just copied what he did.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have actually seen everything and what it actually entails and everything. It's not something you could just do, and they wouldn't have had the tool because the nail gun and everything. I think this was legitimate.
I like the idea that they
forgot about.
I like the idea that they're smart enough to copy something.
Yeah, maybe. I do think it was a leftover trap that he may have set up or forgotten about, because I could see, like, when we see him make that one trap, he puts a little vial of blood. He knew there were creatures in there. The way I looked at it was he probably saw a creature near that place, set a trap, and then waited all day. And you're not going to take that down. It's just, it's on my route. I will go check that place every once in a while. That's how I looked at it. But he gets caught in a trap, whether it's his or one that the monster's duplicated. He's cutting himself down with his knife. And this has happened in so many movies when somebody gets caught in a trap like that. It's like one of the ones where there's like a rope and you step in it and then it pulls you up into the tree or whatever. And people fall on their goddamn knives all the time. But he like falls. Yeah. You let go of the knife when you're done cutting, so you don't do exactly that. So he gets a knife in his leg.
Oh, I thought he landed on it because he did let go of it.
No, he had it in his hand.
I would make a point to hold on to it and keep it above my head.
Yeah, but when you hit the ground, you can do it. It's better just to like fling it away. So it's away from where you're going to land.
That seems like you're adding a step that has a variable that you can't control.
Maybe. But anyway, so he gets stabbed in the leg, but he's like, he sees these infected dogs, and they make a comment that dogs are immune to the airborne version of this virus, but they're not immune to the physical version, the contact strain. So he sees these dogs, and he's like trying to he's on his back, and he's like pushing himself back. And then like he's waiting to the point where like there's almost no sunlight left. And then he gets up and shuffles along. Like, dude, when you're in a life or death situation, you get your adrenaline and you go. And like that kind of bothered me.
That bothered me
too. What he did is he eventually turned over before doing that. Before he turned over or got up and ran, he was doing like the really slow shuffle for several minutes. And then eventually when like the dog, like he sees it's like, oh shit, he turns over on his stomach and does like an army crawl. And then like the last 10 feet he gets up and runs. Like, why would you not turn over and do the army crawl earlier? Like, you need to get out of there. That kind of bothered me. But you know, that's nitpicky. But I was like, man, it's your fault. But that's all I have for this movie.
Poor dog.
It was
I really liked
better than I thought it was going to be for this viewing. I didn't think it was going to be.
Can I finish my notes?
Yep.
Or if you're done with your notes, we just finish the podcast. Is that how it is?
Well, I mean, it has been an hour and 22 minutes. We got to wrap this shit up. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Sorry, we're going to talk about this for 3 hours. No, I was just going to say I really liked the Bob Marley analogy or story at the end. I thought they tied that up in a nice way. And then the daughter was named Marley, which I think is funny because there's that movie Marley and Me is about a dog dying, and his dog and the daughter named Marley dies.
Oh,
I thought that was funny. The little white boy at the end that Anna brings, Ethan, which is like the whitest fucking little kid name. He's kind of a weird looking kid, right?
Yeah, he grows up and is even funkier looking. He's a pretty big character in Ozark, and he's funnier looking
which I keep
and skinnier.
Hearing that I need to watch.
You should.
Okay, well, I'm glad I picked out a weird looking kid correctly. Okay. So I have a couple things that we could talk about for another hour, but we don't have to. But I want to say it. So in the beginning, Emma Thompson, who, by the way, is playing kind of a similar character to the character that she played in that HBO show, what is it called? Year After Year or Time and Time Again or something. You know what I'm talking about? She plays plays like a prime minister in the UK and the world or something, and the world like collapses into fascism and then anarchy and stuff. So it's like weirdly has similar
it's
things.
Still relevant shit.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, she makes an analogy about the measles thing where she says, what if we took a virus that's bad and it's kind of like, somebody driving a car wildly down the street and they're driving I forget how she said it. They're driving a very fast car and it could be bad if they hit somebody. But what if you took the driver out and replaced it with a cop? Think about the good that a cop could do in a fast or powerful car or whatever. I don't remember exactly how she says it, but it makes a little bit more sense. But the funny thing to me is that she makes this analogy about how putting a cop into a place of power makes a situation better, and then it immediately cuts to 3 years later and the world is ruined. And I was like, oh, that's fucking really relevant right now.
That's great. Yeah, that's funny. That's
Unintended
obviously through a
consequence
2020 lens, but of course, yeah, it is kind of funny.
And then the other thing I was going to say was about the end of the movie, where similarly to the original we talked about has this kind of like weird anti-evolution stance at the very end that Vincent Price sort of they tack on, or he starts yelling about. And this movie starts to take sort of has weird implications where it almost feels like the anti-vaxxers are right in this world, where like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be injecting something into our bodies that could cure cancer because it does this awful thing. Like, that's literally what anti-vaxxers are trying to say. And then they really, and this is something I didn't really agree with in the movie, but it also kind of made me think about where the movie's coming from, so I kind of appreciate that. But they really lean into Anna's faith about God and how there is the survivors colony or whatever, and God told her that, and I was like,
but then she uses proof, like God told her to turn on the radio that day, and then she heard his voice,
and then Will Smith like kind of believes it. And then the crux of the movie is the butterfly thing again, where he sees the butterfly, which like his daughter was always talking about butterflies. Right. And then he sees that she has a butterfly tattoo, and he's like, oh, maybe God does have a plan. Maybe there is a God. And that's why he decides to kill himself and save his blood with her so that they can save humanity. Right. He thinks that's his purpose or whatever. And that's like, that's all well and good. And that's also just kind of like storytelling connections. Like, we need to make connections because we're humans and humans tell stories and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of interesting, but like painting it with this, there is a God and God has a plan thing kind of rubs me the wrong way. And then I sort of answered my own question a little bit with the last shot of the movie, because the last shot of the movie is her pulling up to the survivors colony and saying like, this man was a legend and he, you know, made it so that people can survive and be treated or whatever. And the last shot of the movie is the survivors colony from, you know, a bird's eye view. And we see that she pulls up, there's this wall there, there's this like farm, and then there's a church very prominently right in the middle of the town. And then off to the side, there's all of these like solar panels and like advanced windmills that like shit that you don't even see, but it's clearly like wind powered stuff. And I was like, oh, I think this movie is trying to balance faith and science together, because Will Smith was very science based, and it obviously wasn't serving him until this woman came by through chance and faith and blah, blah, blah. So I think this movie is trying to say that there needs to be a balance of science and faith. Yeah, which like I you know, I'm a devout atheist, and the Anna thing was a little much for me, but I also don't want to argue with like balancing these things and like, you know, inherently like treating people the way that you want to be treated and having, you know, faith in something bigger than you, maybe in a sense of community, makes sense to me, but not necessarily in like an old guy with a big white beard in the sky telling you what to do. So I guess it ended on a better note, but it felt like it leaned a little heavy for me. Like
I've seen this several times and I didn't pick up on that. I didn't notice the church in that shot. So that's actually a pretty interesting way of doing that melding. Cause, I'm not, I'm more of an agnostic, which like, I think there's certain things out there that can't be explained, whether it's science, whether it's, you know, energy or whatnot. I'm kind of against organized religion just because I've seen it like fuck a lot of people up. But I do see there are places where I'm of the mindset that religion, faith, and science can mend, and they don't necessarily contradict each other. Like, for example, the parting of the Red Sea with Moses, there actually is a phenomenon that's been observed that if the wind hits that area just right, there actually is a place that the water will actually get to being only a couple of inches deep, where you could theoretically, if you timed it just right, get across. So we know that, you know, maybe that wasn't necessarily a miracle, but that's a science, but it came through. So there are certain things that you can say, you know, the things that in the Bible did happen. Now, obviously, the Bible's written by man. We don't need to get into a whole
I was going to say, discussion. You're opening a can of worms here.
I do think that is a great way of ending, saying, hey, you need to have faith. You need to believe in something, but science is our friend too. And
yeah, and I like saying it that way, and I like the way that the movie ended with this balance of things. I think balance is great. And like I said, I like that it invites discussion. Like maybe we disagree with organized religion, but this movie is the last shot of the movie is sort of inviting a conversation about having faith in certain things versus an organized religion. I think that's interesting. But where I have a bone to pick with it is, I don't know how to say it. Not necessarily how quickly he changed his mind, but how quickly the movie says, hey, forget all this science stuff that we've been doing for the past hour and 30 minutes. Now we have this message we're shoehorning in at the end. It felt like very
everything
sudden.
to do with them changing the original ending of the film.
Yeah, man. Studio notes.
Yep.
So, our enemy really isn't having faith. It's the, corporation and greed.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get into it because, we kind of touched on it when we were talking about the Vincent Price one, but I do appreciate, and now granted, this is a military man, but his survival skills were so much better. He had an actual fortified building. He had like a minefield set up. He had, big steel shutters over his windows. He was growing corn in Central Park. He had stockpiles of food and everything. Like this,
and I think that ties into
that he'd survive.
And I think that ties into the 50 years of growth that this genre has had.
Exactly.
In the meantime,
I think that makes a lot more sense.
We need to examine these things and answer questions that are going to come up instead of just telling a B movie story.
Exactly. So I appreciate that. Like I was saying, I went into this movie expecting not to be good. I didn't think it was going to be bad or terrible, but I didn't think it was going to be good. But I was engaged in the entire movie, and so in my opinion, this was a worthy remake. It's getting made into a TV series now called Why the Last Man, which is loosely based off. It's the same kind of thing.
Well, that was a graphic novel first.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's is it connected to I Am Legend though?
I could be wrong. Maybe
I think it's just a similar story.
Oh, okay.
I think Why the Last Man is, and we're going to probably we're going to get our 3 fans to message in and tell us why we're wrong. I'm pretty sure Why the Last Man is,
he's the last man and it's the Y chromosome. Oh, okay. Exactly. Yeah, it's nothing to do with anything.
But it's post-apocalyptic. He's the last of something.
Cool.
Yeah, man. I went in expecting it to be, forgettable and not mediocre, but just passable or whatever. And this movie jumped way up on my list for sure.
What's funny is after talking to you about it and hearing your reviews, there were several things that you pointed out during this discussion that I never even considered. So I think even during the course of this, hour and a half or so that we've been talking over about both movies, I actually have a bigger appreciation for it after talking to you about the film than I did after watching it. And I thought the movie was better than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
After talking to you, I actually appreciate it even more. So I actually really valued this conversation and the insight you had on the movie. So thanks, bud.
Thanks, bud. That's really nice to hear. I appreciate that.
Yeah. To wrap it up, on another note, we're going to talk about the news now. Movie news. It's going to be very quick. There wasn't a ton. Obviously, nothing is really shooting right now. One of the stories I sent you was literally like minutes after we finished recording Pete's Dragon. You were talking about how much you loved Pete's Dragon on our last episode, the Carl Urban 2016 version. The director of that film is actually directing the live action Peter Pan movie, and the talks are that Jude Law is going to be Captain Hook. Totally on board with that.
Yeah, that's cool.
If we need another Peter Pan movie, why not get the guy who did Pete's Dragon and knocked that out of the park?
That's funny because Rooney Mara was in his previous movie, A Ghost Story, and Rooney Mara was also in the Pan movie.
God, that movie was a piece of shit.
That got panned.
That was terrible. Did you see it?
No, I didn't see it. That's one Rooney Mara movie that I will never see.
Don't. It is awful. It's irredeemable. The other news that I have is Fletch is being rebooted with John Hamm instead of Chevy Chase.
I'm in. That's cool.
I'm on board for that. I love John Hamm. I think he's fantastic, and I don't think he's in enough things. Katrina doesn't think he's that great. I think he's fantastic in everything I've seen him in, from Mad Men to Bridesmaids to Tag.
I wish that he was Batman, infectious.
Dude. That's what I was saying. I think he would have been a better Batman. Him or Josh Brolin should have been Batman as the older Batman.
Yeah, Brolin's
would be good
interesting.
too.
Oh, well, did we talk about Keaton coming back? Did we talk about that last week?
We talked about that like 3 episodes in a row, bud.
Oh, well, fuck me. This quarantine is really doing something to me, man.
This would be episode 3 that it was brought up, though.
All right.
But that's it.
I just really like Michael Keaton.
So do I. I'm glad that
You know,
we
it's-
kind of had a renaissance of him.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I think this is why I thought I keep on wanting to talk about it. I've been, this is so silly. I've been going to bed. I like to have like white noise playing, and I discovered
was
that
in white noise.
Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. I like to have just like stuff on in the background. He was in that movie, Stuff On in the Background, and I discovered
like
that
to live
Kevin
dangerously.
Smith.
He was in Johnny Dangerously.
I discovered that Kevin Smith did commentary tracks for both Burton Batmans and both Schumacher Batmans.
Interesting.
And I can't make it through a whole one before I fall asleep. So I've just been like playing them for like 6 days.
Oh, cool.
And for some reason, like Kevin Smith is just very easy to fall asleep to. That sounds bad.
Yeah.
He's just very soothing. So I think I
never want to
Batman
hear about
on the
things
brain.
you've been listening or consuming in this segment of the show. This isn't the "What have you been up to, bud" segment. This should have been then.
Well, yeah, it feels relevant. We're talking about Batman, man.
No, you brought up Batman.
There's nothing
was
wrong
not
with
the
bringing
time
up
or
Batman.
place.
It's always the time or place to bring up
I'm just
Batman. I'm legitimately excited for Robert Pattinson to be Batman, by the way.
I'm
I don't know
very
if it's going to be good, but I'm here for
I
it.
appreciate everything we've seen from that movie as a big swing. We've been talking about big swings a lot in this episode, but
Yeah.
I like that they're the Bat. I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, but yeah, that Batmobile. I'm really excited about that.
I'm happy to be proven wrong here. The only thing that I've not stoked on that I've seen is the like faceplate on his mask. It looks like it's stitched like around his forehead, around his hairline, and it looks weird to me in the pictures I've seen. But I know that, can't make a judgment now.
I don't like the cowl, but I think it's also because he's got a funny shaped head, and there's only so much you can do to hide a funny shaped.
It looks like an old football helmet, like those leather ones.
Yeah, the leather heads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with John Krasinski and George Clooney, who was also Batman.
Oh, bring it all around. All right, let's wrap up the show,
All right.
bud. Where can our listeners find you on the social medias?
I am on Twitter at Pulisci, my last name, Pulisci. That is also my name on Letterboxd if you want to follow along with what I'm watching. And you can find me on Instagram at Dysalexic, DYS, Alex, IC. And I sell my cool shirts and stuff on there too.
He does. The shirts are pretty rad. I've talked about it before. I sleep in it. Originally, I intended to get it to be like wearing
That's
around,
adorable.
but it's so comfy. It's very
Yeah.
soft. Check out his t-shirts, guys. They're pretty fucking great. I really like it. Every time we do laundry, the first thing I do is I go and find that shirt to pull out while it's warm, and I wear that to sleep that night. It's great.
That's adorable. I love that we have that connection.
You literally have clothed me, friend.
And kept you safe and comfy and soft.
Yep. In my socially distant social club shirt. You guys can check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MDXpods. And arrest the cops that killed Renna Taylor. That still hasn't happened. We're just going to shoehorn that in. We're not going to plug Patreon. We want you guys to support the movement still.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep, no secret police. That's a slippery slope that we can't get into. And
We're
we
ending
ended the
on a
episode
happy
on a
note.
downer. Bye, guys.
Yay.